Hi, this is Neil Griffin with Liferay, and today I'd like to talk to you about Liferay DXP and Elasticsearch 7. Here I've got Chrome running, and I'm at the elastic.co website, and under the products menu there's Elk Stack and then Elasticsearch. If you click on that, there's or download and get started. That's another link that you can click on, and then there are buttons here appropriate for the version of Elasticsearch for your system. I'm on a Mac, so what I did is earlier I clicked on the Mac button, and what that did is it downloaded this file right here, Elasticsearch 761. It's a tar.gz file. Now, before I install that, I want to talk about this connector here, the Liferay connector to Elasticsearch 7. This is something that you get from the Liferay Marketplace website. Why is that important? Well, Liferay DXP 7.2, which is what I'm going to show you today, ships with Elasticsearch 6 as a connector. It also embeds Elasticsearch 6 within Liferay DXP so that when I start up the JVM that's running Liferay as OSGI modules, Tomcat, and Elasticsearch, it's all happening in the same JVM. And that's not performant. We're going to want to have an Elasticsearch cluster. Now what I'm going to show you today is what we call a single node cluster for Elasticsearch. In a production environment, you'd want to have 3 nodes, because what that does is it avoids what Elasticsearch calls the split brain problem. I'll let you read more about that in the Elasticsearch literature and the documentation. But what we'll need is we'll need to download this connector, and when we do, it looks like this file right here, Liferay connector to Elasticsearch 7.lpkg. What I did earlier is I downloaded that to the, I copied it over to the deploy folder here. This is a Liferay Tomcat bundle for Liferay DXP that I've extracted, and here's the typical file layout or folder layout: data, deploy, license, logs, OSGI, and so on. And I copied that LPKG file to the deploy folder, and then Liferay picks it up and will install it here under the marketplace folder. Well, let's take a look at what happened during startup. You'll see here there are 2 warnings, and they have the same error message. Liferay is configured to use embedded Elasticsearch as its search engine. Do not use this in production. Okay, so we bundle Elasticsearch in this embedded mode so that it's convenient for you, so that you can see what Liferay is like, so that you can upload some documents, get the search index going, search for things. It's a convenience. Well, the reason why the message is in there twice, you can see it's coming from embedded Elasticsearch connection line 281 and also line 288. Why these 2 lines? It's because we have 2 connectors installed. The out-of-the-box one that came with Elasticsearch 6 as a connector, and then the one that I had installed, Elasticsearch 7. So what we want is we want to disable the Elasticsearch 6 one. The way we do that is by blacklisting the OSGI modules. And then we want to configure the Elasticsearch 7 modules so that they will connect to our single node external, or what we call remote cluster. So let me go back to the instructions here. We have some instructions on installing Elasticsearch, upgrading to Elasticsearch 7, blacklisting OSGI modules, and the Felix Gogo shell. I want to talk about each of these in turn. First of all, to install Elasticsearch, there are different steps that we're going to want to follow. We're going to want to download the supported version of Elasticsearch, which I have done already, and then we're going to install it, extract it, install it. We're going to install some plugins and so on. But before I do that, I want to visit this page over here, upgrading to Elasticsearch 7. This talks about what I need to do in order to disable the Elasticsearch 6 connector that comes out of the box. And right here you can see step 1 is to create this file, which is called blacklistconfiguration.config, and then paste this text in there. Well, what's that all about? Let's first go to the control panel. I'll sign in here as Bruno. He's our administrator user. I'm going to click on Control Panel, Configuration, System Settings, and then Search. When I do, you'll notice that there are two menu items here. There's Elasticsearch 6 and 7, and our goal is to make 6 go away and then to configure 7. Well, in order to do that, we need to blacklist modules. Let me click on System Settings again, and then instead of clicking on Search, I'm going to click on Module Container. Here is where I have the opportunity to type in or to paste in some symbolic names for some OSGI modules. Again, Liferay is a modular platform designed with OSGI, and what I can do is I can find out the symbolic names of the OSGI bundles that I want to blacklist, that I don't want to run, paste them in here, and then hit save. If I do that, then an ellipsis will show up, a little ... button, which will allow me to download the external configuration file so that I can keep that over my file system. All right, well, how would I find the symbolic names? Well, we have this page here about how you blacklist, and this other page on using the GoGo shell. If you look at the instructions in the GoGo shell, it talks about the LB command, and that the LB command has a -s flag that you can use. Let's look at it. Under GoGo shell, if I type LB-s, meaning list the symbolic names, and then hit execute, if I just do a Control F and I search for Elasticsearch, you can see here's a module for Elasticsearch 6, there's another one, and so on. Here's the one for 7. There's some others down here mentioning 6. What I want to do is I want to have these symbolic names, and then if I were to do this manually, I would then come back here to Control Panel, Configuration, System Settings, Module Container, and then paste in the symbolic names. Now, as a convenience in the documentation, what we have is we have a way for you to just paste in the symbolic names that you're concerned with. Well, I could take these symbolic names and then paste them into that field and hit save, or I could just follow these instructions here and create this external file, and that's what I've done. It's a file named bundle blacklist configuration.config, and it has this contents right here that lists the symbolic names of the connector for Elasticsearch 6 connector. So I'll go back to my downloads directory, and here is that bundle blacklist configuration file. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come over to the configs folder and paste that in. And when I do that, if I look at the log, the Liferay log, it will show me that those bundles have stopped. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the control panel and system settings, and then search. And you can see here that Elasticsearch 6 is no longer present as a menu item. So we've successfully disabled the Elasticsearch 6 connector. Well, the Elasticsearch 7 connector needs to be configured. We can do that one of two ways. We could use the control panel UI here. This value here is good. Liferay Elasticsearch cluster, that's good. Operation mode, we would want that to be remote. And the other important field here is the transport address. Now I'm going to go with the default value here, but if you have an Elasticsearch cluster, let's say you have 3 nodes in your cluster, you're going to need to list the host name and port of all of the nodes in your cluster. Whether they're master nodes or data nodes, you need all of them in there. And the way you do additional ones is by clicking on this plus button right here. Then you would come down here, you would hit save, and after doing that you would have an ellipsis, a ... button here that you could click on, and you could download a config file. Well, I've done that already. It's over here in my downloads folder, and that contains the information I need to configure the connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over and shut down the Liferay Tomcat bundle. Okay, I'll shut that down. And while that's shutting down, I'm going to install Elasticsearch. So here at the Liferay Help Center, we have this page installing Elasticsearch, and it says to download the supported version. I've done that already. And the first step it says to do is to punch in this. Well, we can skip this. If you punch in this, and if you have Liferay running, then you should see some JSON come back here that reports that your embedded version is running. I can't do that right now because I shut down Liferay. All right, next step would be to install Elasticsearch and then install some plugins. So let's do that. I have this folder here under my servers folder called elastic.co, and I'm going to take the tar.gz file and paste it, and then I'll double click on that and that will extract it. Then I don't need the tar.gz file anymore. And here's the folder structure: bin, config, lib, and so on. Well, what I want to do first is I want to configure this elasticsearch.yaml. And when I do that, my editor comes up. The instructions say that I want to change this cluster name. Okay, getting a little ahead of myself. Here we go. Cluster name, Liferay Elasticsearch cluster. So let me change that. And then another setting that I like to put in there is this one, this cluster routing allocation disk watermark flood stage, because it if you have a hard disk that's somewhat full and you don't want to get a lot of warnings in your log, you can put that in there and you'll save some log space that way. So I'm going to save that file. And let me go back to, okay, so this is the elasticsearch.yaml file that I edited. Well, then what we need to do is we need to go into the bin folder, and I need to execute this Elasticsearch plugin command and install some plugins according to the instructions. So here I am at the terminal, and I'm going to cd into Elasticsearch 761 and then cd into bin. And we can see here that I need to install some plugins. First one is going to be analysis-icu. So I run elasticsearch-plugin install and then specify the plugin name. Next one is analysis Kuromoji. So I'll run that. Analysis Smart CN, and then analysis Stumple. So now my plugins are installed. Okay, and now I'm able to start up Elasticsearch. And the way I do that is just by typing /Elasticsearch. So while that is starting up, let's head back over here, and I'm going to take this connector, the Elasticsearch, the configuration for the Elasticsearch 7 connector. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to copy that over to the configs folder. So now I've got two configs. I've got the one for blacklisting the Elasticsearch 6 bundles, and I've also got this file which is going to configure the Elasticsearch 7 connection. And of course what it's going to do is it's going to connect to our remote, meaning our separate process, single node Elasticsearch cluster. So let's see how Elasticsearch is doing on the startup. Okay, and now let's start up Liferay. And that's going to take a little while to start. So while we're waiting for that, I'd like to talk about this project right here. This is a project that's put together by my colleague Jonas Choi, who's a sales engineer at Liferay. And what he's attempting to do here is to automate the process of composing Docker images to do this. Now this is for, in its current state, is for Elasticsearch 6. But what it does is it will create, let's see if you look at the Docker compose file, it will create a Docker image for Elasticsearch right here, and then another one for MySQL as a database, and then another one that's called Tomcat. But what it's doing is it's pulling down an image from Docker Hub. And so what it will do is if you were to execute Docker compose up, it would then assemble and put together these 3 Docker images and have Liferay talk to the MySQL database instead of hypersonic, and would have Liferay talk to this Elasticsearch node as well. So I just wanted to point this out to you. It's available at GitHub. So let's go back to Liferay, and can we see Liferay has started up, and we don't see any warnings regarding Elasticsearch. That's good. So let's go back to the control panel, system settings, and we'll wait for that to respond. Sometimes the first request is a little slow. Here we go. And if we hit search right here, Elasticsearch 7, you can see that the configuration is remote, right? A Liferay Elasticsearch cluster, and so on. So it's as though I had typed it in and then hit save. But by having the external config file there, which I could get again if I wanted to, if I clicked on the ... button and then export, I could get that file down again. But the next step here is the final step. If you look at the instructions in upgrading, we need to reindex. And we do that by going to the control panel, configuration and search, and then the reindex button. So let's find that over here. Search. It's not under system settings and then search. It's under configuration and then search. And then we reindex all search indices. And then when you do that, you should see in your Elasticsearch log some update mapping commands here. And then the progress indicator will hit 100% when it's done reindexing the search index. So that's our lesson for today. I wanted to thank you for listening in. We learned how to disable the Elasticsearch 6 connector that comes with Liferay DXP 6.2, how to configure the connector for Elasticsearch 7, and then how to reindex so that DXP is communicating with an Elasticsearch cluster. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.